Hello everyone, Brad Johnson here. And so I did another channeled writing with Adronis, and this channeled writing is all about the building blocks of humanity. And so the question I posed to Adronis was, I asked Adronis about the creation of our human species on Earth. What was the decision that allowed us to become who we are today? Why the ambition, as it were, in creating human beings such as ourselves? Adronis replies, We acknowledge your query, Brad. The ambition, as you call it, was not something that came spontaneously, but as a means of expressing reunification to many human and humanoid races that over time created degradation in failed cloning, subrace, and indigenous human development through independent channels across many different neighboring star systems. During this point of genetic evolution, many creators had wanted to advance their genomes as a means of creating a universal form that would allow a greater conscious connection to the Creator rather than creating certain human bipedal species that took them further from it, such as the utilization of technology or diluted genetics that would enable human species connection to become more prolific and grandiose via soul bonding experience. Everything culminated to the point where humanity would be the next step in genetic expression, as it related to many of your stellar ancestors. Much of the human experiments began upon the planet that you would know as Meldak. To the beginning of its human creation was well within your billions of years ago. Meldak was the staging ground in beginning certain prolific creations of trials that represented the human being that would enable prolific bondage with soul hosts. During the time of the dawning of such an experiment taking place upon Meldak, there were more selected incarnations diversified by many different races, and in a way, this represented a type of incarnate racism. Karmic connections would only enable certain souls to incarnate with specific sects of beings, such as reptilian, insectoid, feline, aquatic, avian, humanoid, etc. There were no perceived bridges to construct that would allow other souls to host themselves with an array of different bodies. It was not understood of ever happening at that time. But as the development of different subhuman races were becoming created on different worlds such as Meldak, it was a celebration of great harmony as many saw the prosperity that was taking place upon such a world. Meldak was stationed within the outer rim of the galaxy, which would make it a fringe location to many different forms of intergalactic affairs and interstellar politics. In other words, other civilizations that were of human design were seeing what was taking place upon Meldak and saw all of the abundance that was being created through this, shall we say, grassroots world, where breakaway civilizations came together and expressed in harmony what would eventually lead to the creation of humanity. Think of it as it were pertaining to your peer-to-peer networks, organic channels of genetic farming races that came together and allowed their creations of races pertaining to humanity that would flourish upon a world which began certain genetic combination experiments and allowing the early stages of humanity to come alive and function as harmonious stewards upon a beautiful world. Eventually, over time, more farming races joined the cause as news broke out about how a great deal of abundance was being established upon one of the fringe systems in the outer rim of our galaxy. Eventually, this also led to unwanted attention on what was transpiring with other races that sought conquest and domination. This led to an eventual contaminated experimentation as the original creators that began with the Meldak human lost control of the project due to many other offshoot races, and these other beings began skirmishes and wished to harvest much of the genetic stock that was used in creating such prolific life forms. They then began to tinker with the genetics through their own means, and began creating humanoid life forms tweaked with their own genetic makeup. Because the experiment got out of hand, a great deal of duality overthrew the planet. This led to the developed species to become warlike and bent on conquest, empires, and domination. This led to the downfall of Maldek as a race that was originally created out of love, and fellowship became corrupted by other races and their karmic imprints to become polarizing and warlike. This led to the destruction of Maldek through the means of an internal war. From the destruction of Maldek came the attempt of developing the human experiment upon the beautiful Earth-like world of Mars. Again, it represented a pristine time of grace and harmony, and then fell to the ravages of polarity, as what happened with Maldek. Mars was eventually destroyed, and the experiment then moved on to Earth, where further experimentations of the early humanoid was also under a veil of harmony. Through the refugees that were salvaged and migrated from Mars, this intermingling of a different human race came upon an already established and harmonized collection of different human beings that eventually led to the same karmic result as Earth's ancestors before them. Mars, Earth, and Venus were original staging grounds of continued prosperity that began with the Maldek experiment. If Maldek were the genesis of unified humanity, Mars, Earth, and Venus were the progeny as it pertained to the experiment, developing the genetics of humanoid races that all shared in the attempt of allowing a universal model of incarnate vessel to become an experiment in allowing soul to become prestigious creators and develop a harmonized connection with Mother Nature. Yet many of these experiments became contaminated and exposed from other beings who had other interests in mind, as it represents domination, control, and power. In conclusion, the original intention for the creation of the human race, as you understand your species, is to create a work of art that would hold within its own capabilities the connections and abilities to work as the Creator would work, to become God as God has created all things. The love for expression and the creation of love that would further itself in endless development, rediscovering the roots back to the original creation of Source through mankind's acts, where the parents of the created man have passed their knowledge to the children, and the children could be the parents, and more, re-establishing their realization to Source consciousness in the most beautiful ways expressed. This would be our perspective as it relates to the genesis of your race and the races that followed, leading to the point of your capabilities as loving free will creators. We will now conclude this interaction. We thank you. Alright, so this is the channeled writing as it relates to the building blocks of humanity. So thank you again for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking to you again in another perspective of the now. Take care. Namaste.